Hey, this is Alex, pastor at Living Faith Bible Church, with this week's Sermon Huddle video. Each Sunday after the sermon, we try and huddle together for a discussion about the past sermon and how it applies to our lives, any questions we have, any insights we've gained, and just learn together as a community. And then I try and post a Sermon Huddle video during the week in which we're able to try and learn together and continue to dialogue and discuss. So that's what I'm trying to do this week here on Wednesday, release a little video of discussion about this past Sunday's sermon. The sermon came from Ecclesiastes chapter 6 through 8, where Solomon essentially is telling us something maybe we already know but need to hear, and that is life isn't always what it seems. In fact, there are four themes that Solomon addresses in chapter 6 through 8. He says, first of all, prosperity isn't always what it seems. He speaks about that in chapter 6, verse 2. God gives some people wealth, possessions, and honor so that they lack nothing their hearts desire, but God does not grant them the ability to enjoy them. Sometimes prosperity isn't always what it seems. He speaks also about adversity isn't always what it seems, and that seems counterintuitive because we tend to think that adversity might mean more and more heartache, but sometimes actually a deeper understanding of life only comes through adversity. He speaks about that in chapter 7, verse 2, when he says, "It is better to go to a house of mourning than to go to a house of feasting." Seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? He also speaks about learning and his quest for learning and understanding. He speaks about how he sought out all the knowledge of the world, and yet in the end he speaks in chapter 8 about verse 16 and 17, especially verse 17, when he says, "Then I saw all that God had done. No one can comprehend what goes on under the sun. Despite all their efforts to search it out, no one could discover its meaning. Even if the wise claim they know, they really can't comprehend it." Solomon was being honest that despite all of his efforts to try and understand things, there were times where he simply had to acknowledge he was confused and didn't understand a lot of life. And then the fourth area is justice. As a king, he was charged with administering justice in his empire, but he recognized that justice isn't always what it seems. And he acknowledged in chapter 8, verse 14, there is something else meaningless that occurs on heaven. The righteous get what the wicked deserve, and the wicked get what the righteous deserve. Sometimes law-abiding citizens do not benefit, and evildoers seem to benefit. And that makes life very confusing, and it shows us that life isn't always what it seems. So a question for you for thought and discussion. And again, please feel free to email me, text me, call me, make a comment in the comments section. Here's the question for thought and reflection. How many of us really honestly believe that if only if we had more money, our life would be more meaningful? And how does our culture reinforce this? I actually believe that's one of the greatest lies in our culture, that adversity is the way to, that prosperity, is the way to meaning in life, and adversity, avoiding it, is the way to meaning in life, right? And yet Solomon seems to say the exact opposite. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that we give up all of our resources, that we're not wise stewards of what we have, but how many of us and how much does our culture reinforce this idea that we believe that if we just had more money, more resources, more wealth, we would truly be happy? And yet, isn't there a lot of evidence in our culture that that's not the case? Think about that. Reflect on that. I know I'm thinking about that and reflecting on that in my own life, the ways in which I'm kind of valuing that comfort and prosperity more maybe than I am my relationship with God. And so as Solomon's wrestling with this, he actually also shows us through his life and through his writings that there's a couple ways that people cope with the seemingly meaninglessness of life. When we realize that prosperity doesn't bring life and it seems and sometimes bring hardship, when learning doesn't seem to give us the satisfaction in life that we're looking for, when justice seems to be turned on its head, and when maybe we're facing adversity and we don't know what to do about it, we might try to find some meaning through some approaches that aren't always healthy and holy. One of those that Solomon explored was escaping into hedonism. He speaks about that in Ecclesiastes chapter 2 when he says, I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. Doesn't that reflect the spirit of our culture? Escaping into hedonism. Pleasure seeking. Hedonism means to seek pleasure at its highest good, to find our meaning and satisfaction in the pleasure of life. Isn't that the way many of us are striving to find meaning in life, by escaping into hedonism? I guess the question would be, how's that really going for our culture? How's that going for us as individuals? Do we find more meaning by simply finding all the pleasure we can in life and avoiding all the other issues of life? Second way that we might, and Solomon at times did respond to the meaninglessness of life, is to slide into despair. He speaks about that also in chapter 2, but he also references it in chapter 3 and chapter 6, chapter 7. And he says this in chapter 2, I hated life. My heart began to despair. Despair. Hopelessness seems to be something that many in our culture are feeling today, especially in light of all that we've been through over the last 2 years or so in this pandemic. Sliding into despair. That's the way Solomon felt at times. Maybe that's the way some of us feel. In what ways do you think our culture is showing characteristics of one of these two, if not both? Escaping into hedonism, sliding into despair. Do you see in the culture at large today many of the signs that hedonism and despair is the way that many people are going? Well, what is the answer in the book of Ecclesiastes? This is a really good question. And Solomon wrestles with a lot of these questions and gives us relatively few answers. But here's one answer he repeatedly gives us. In chapter 3, chapter 5, chapter 8, chapter 12, he uses 2 words to tell us how we should respond to all of these challenges of life. And here's the 2 words. Are you ready? Fear God. To fear God does not mean to cower in the corner, hide your face, that kind of fear, although every once in a while maybe it's good to have some genuine fear of God. But no, it means reverence, it means to honor, it means to seek after, to have faith, to trust in God, to seek Him above all else. So even when we don't understand what's going on around us, we can still fear God, we can reverence Him, we can trust Him, we can have faith in Him. And so Solomon says when life isn't always what it seems, and it'll happen to all of us, right? When prosperity isn't always what it seems, when your adversity is piling up against you and you don't know how to handle it, even though you know it's something that God brought in your life and yet you don't understand it, when learning and seeking after all the answers of life by the ways of the world doesn't satisfy, when you look around and you say, where's the justice in this world? Don't escape into hedonism, don't escape into despair, but seek answers by faith. St. Augustine said that we are people of faith seeking understanding. That doesn't mean we understand everything, but we root ourselves in faith as we seek to understand. And we won't always understand everything, but nevertheless, we're going to trust God for our lives. And that is what it means to fear God. When we realize that we're a creature who doesn't have all the answers, but there is a creator above us all, and we simply fear Him and trust Him. Hope that helps. Please share with me your comments and your thoughts about this Sunday sermon. Any questions or insights you have, I'd love to hear from you. Put it in the comments section below. Share with me an email, a text, a call. Love to hear from you. Take care and God bless.